Order. I will call Susan Murray to move the motion and then the Minister to respond. Can I remind other members that they can only make a speech with prior permission of Susan Murray and from the Minister, and because it's a 30-minute one, there's not going to be a wind-up for Susan Murray at the end. Order, order. Susan Murray to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered Scotland's contribution to energy security and net zero. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship, Madam Chair, and it's a privilege to lead this debate on a matter that will have such an impact on Scotland's economy, our cost of living and our national security. Let me be clear at the outset. Scotland plays a disproportionate role in keeping the lights on across Great Britain, and Scotland is leading the way in the shift to clean power. The evidence is clear. The House of Commons Library noted that in 2024, clean power made up 90% of the generation in Scotland. The Department for Energy Security and Net Zero has published figures showing that Scotland produces significantly more energy than it consumes, transferring 17 terawatt-hours of excess energy to England in 2024. Or, in terms we can all understand, enough energy to power every home in London for 2 years. This production benefits us all. It supports energy security and makes us resilient from international events. And it helps to decarbonise the grid for everyone. But there's a problem that we can't ignore. Despite that enormous contribution, too often Scots do not see a fair share of the benefit in good jobs, in local investment, or in lower bills. The case I want to make today is simple. Scotland is delivering. The UK's policy and delivery machine must now match that pace with fairness, infrastructure, and security. And the North Sea is the place to start. The Scottish Affairs Committee has set out the stark reality. In 2024, oil and gas production reached a record 21st century low, with around 75% below the 1999 peak. Decline isn't an abstract theory, it's measurable across Scotland. The workforce impact is already significant. Commons Library notes that there were 121,000 direct and indirect jobs supported by the oil and gas industry in 2023, a 51% fall compared with 2014. If workers leave before the clean energy pipeline reaches its potential, we will not simply transition, we will lose the skilled labour that is vital to a successful transition. Would you weigh on that? I would.
Thank the member for giving way and for bringing this debate. And I completely agree with the vital importance of the oil and gas sector in order to secure the workforce in our energy industries. I would, however, just like some clarity on the Liberal Democrats' position. My understanding is that the Liberal Democrats as a party support Labour's ban on new licences and also in their manifesto wanted to backdate the energy profits levy. Is that still the Liberal Democrats' position on the North Sea?
Thank you very much, and thank you for that intervention. The Liberal Democrats are very keen that we move to a source of green energy, and we have called on, or we are calling for the energy profits levy to be re-looked at. It was introduced as a windfall tax in particular circumstances when there were very high profits coming through, and we believe that this should now be looked at again.
Would you already give way, please? Madam Chair, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Mid-Dumbartonshire for bringing this forward? She's absolutely right to do so. The contribution to net zero targets from the devolved institutions are so important, and I'm pleased to hear of Scotland's success in relation to it, and I thank the Honourable Lady for bringing it forward, and I look forward to the Minister's response. Northern Ireland shares the commitment to a net zero future by 2050, but our smaller grid, limited renewable capacity and reliance on imported electricity means achieving this goal is more challenging. So does the Honourable Lady agree that we must make sure that no part of the United Kingdom is left behind? I wish the Honourable Lady well for Scotland, but in relation to us, the green energy transition, and all devolved nations are given the tools necessary to succeed.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Honourable Member for that intervention. I absolutely agree, and although I'm focusing on Scotland in this speech, it's Scotland as part of the UK and not Scotland alone. So we We want to make sure that we don't lose the skilled labour that's vital to a successful transition, because we will then have to pay more later to import labour and expertise to do the work that we should, where the expertise that we should have retained. I also want to be clear about a point that's often overlooked or used by those with a vested interest against renewables. The UK will need oil and gas for the foreseeable future, even as we decarbonise. In that context, and to secure our own energy security, we should meet as much of that demand for hydrocarbons as possible from a secure, well-regulated domestic supply, rather than simply importing more and losing or exporting jobs. Importing more doesn't stop consumption. It simply shifts production elsewhere, often to jurisdictions with lower standards and higher geopolitical risk. Domestic supply, properly regulated, can be the safer bridge while we build out our new low-carbon system at scale and ensure security of supply. Will ministers pull together existing work into a single transition pathway that links North Sea decisions to a workforce plan, covering skills mapping, retaining and supporting where needed? If we want a managed transition, we also have to be honest about the urgency of the whole system needs of a clean grid. A net zero system is essential. Scotland shows that is possible, and that should be the goal. But a renewables-heavy system also needs predictable, low carbon alongside renewables, storage and interconnection. And that's why I support nuclear and why small modular reactors should be part of the plan to achieve net zero in Scotland. Yet the SNP government's position is that this doesn't support building, new nuclear power plants in Scotland under current technologies. Meanwhile, the UK government has confirmed Wilfa in Wales as the site for the UK's first small nuclear reactor. The risk is obvious that Scotland ends up hosting more of the infrastructure footprint of the transition, but without the benefits. While other parts of the UK capture more of the firm power investment and the supply chain jobs, in Scotland, the devolved framework really matters. Nuclear market frameworks and regulation are reserved. Planning and community impacts are devolved and local. Local skills delivery and much economic development are devolved, so this can't work without coordination. Will ministers request UK-Scottish Government talks on Scotland's nuclear policy with SMRs explicitly on the agenda to highlight the positive economic benefit for Scotland and to push for equal access to jobs and development across the UK? Scotland hosts major clean power generation and transmission infrastructure, but fairness must follow that footprint. I will.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairpersonship. And I thank the Honourable Member for Mid Dunbartonshire for securing this debate today. And I intervene in my capacity as Chair of the Scottish Affairs Committee, of which the Honourable Member, as are so many of the members here today, are valued members. And as she knows, our committee has been examining this entire topic as part of a large-scale inquiry into energy and just transition. And one of the areas we've turned our attention to has been the question of fairness across the UK as we transition to cleaner energy systems. And we've heard evidence from Scotland's community-owned renewable energy sector that they have a significant number of barriers that they face in connecting their projects to the grid, and that they have some unique challenges too, created by the differences between the grid in Scotland compared with the grid in England and Wales. Does she agree with me that that's an area that we must turn our attention to if we're going to make communities able to generate their own electricity and power and be the beneficiaries of that?
Thank you to the Honourable Member for her intervention. I absolutely agree with her. And I think that we have a real opportunity with GB Energy and the current environment that exists, and to take advantage of what the commercial companies are offering with regard to reducing costs for individual homeowners, but also to take the digital technology and use that as a means of making sure that community energy generated into the grid benefits the communities that are part of the infrastructure to generate that power. Because communities see the turbines, substations and pylons. As the grid expands, they will see that too. They live with disruption during construction and operation, and too often they're not seeing the fair value for the disruption they face. And that means that there's an opportunity here, because the government already has been developing the policy infrastructure. DESNES published a working paper seeking views on the design of a potential mandatory community benefit scheme and the facilitation of shared ownership for low-carbon energy infrastructure. And that's not a small thing. It's a recognition that we cannot build at the pace required without public consent. And public consent is strengthened when communities are well informed and share in the long-term value.
May I intervene, please? Yeah. Thank you for allowing me to intervene. Would you agree that £9 million total cumulative benefit from the Highlands and £30 million for Scotland as a whole is a paltry amount for a multi-billion-pound industry?
By the Deputy Speaker for that. It's because the you is me, I'm in the chair, so would the Honourable Member agree? But I think we get the point.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you for the intervention. I absolutely agree. I think that, as I have just said, I think that this is something that needs to be looked at, and there is an opportunity to make sure that communities do benefit all across the UK from the local generation that they have to live with every day. And so will ministers commit to a consistent community benefit and community energy framework for major low-carbon infrastructure so that host communities, especially rural and off-gas grid areas, share in long-term benefits? Beyond the initial generation, we do forget about the grid, and none of our ambitions on net zero or energy security will be met if we can't move the power we generate around the UK. We must fix the grid. We must stop paying to waste clean energy. At the moment, we have built generation of power faster than we've built the network to connect it and transport it. The result is that bill payers are burdened with the cost of electricity that they can't use and which cannot be brought to them. NESO's annual balancing costs report sets out the scale of the problem. It reports that grid constraint costs increased by 64% in 24-25, totalling £1.7 billion. The total energy lost to this failure was 13.5 terawatt hours, nearly as much as Scotland sent to England. This isn't a theoretical cost. That is money households and businesses pay because the network can't always carry the clean power that is available. Will ministers pledge to accelerate grid development and drive connections reform at pace with clear milestones so we stop paying for unused electricity and improve resilience, particularly for rural and remote communities? But the grid is not just an infrastructure issue. It's an opportunity to redevelop our industrial heartlands. If Scotland is powering transition, Scotland should also help build it. Scotland has a proven history in heavy engineering and industrial delivery, ports, fabrication, and a supply chain shaped by decades of offshore work. The transition should not become a story of import the kit, export the jobs.
On that point, thank you for giving way. The members already covered the issue of the EPL, but it's important, I think, to recognise that both Scottish Renewables and OEUK wrote jointly to the Secretary of State and to the Chancellor of the Exchequer expressing their deep concerns about the impact of the Energy Profits Levy and the impact on transition, that it will not be possible to deliver the renewables transition that we all want if the North Sea is allowed to decline, or even forced to decline at the rate it is, because there is not enough effort being put into the renewables side and that transition being supported. Does the member agree with me that this needs to be addressed rapidly by the government? It's about pace of decision making, and it's about certainty for the investors and the developers to ensure that we do make that transition and do make it effectively and provide those jobs for that skilled workforce that she's rightly referred to.
Thank you to the honourable member for your intervention. I absolutely agree. The end is in sight, or the vision is there, but we just take too long to make decisions. And while that happens, our workforce make their own decisions, and businesses too don't come that might be considering coming. So we have to absolutely support the opportunity that's available to us. We must look seriously at how we encourage companies to build the components of the green revolution here. We have the skills and we have the history of great steelworks and dockyards. They can be revitalised and our communities alongside them. But building at home extends further than just good practice. It reduces risk to supply and security. The National Cyber Centre publishes dedicated supply chain security principles to help organisations manage supply chain risk. This is the mindset we need for critical national infrastructure. We've seen why this matters. UK authorities have been looking into reported cybersecurity concerns linked to remote access features in some electric buses imported from China, the same place as much of our green technology comes from. So this isn't about sensationalising or point scoring. If supplier risks matter for buses, it certainly matters for the systems that keep the lights on and our countries running. Will the Minister use the industrial strategy to set out clear UK content and supply chain commitments to ensure that demand for grid and energy production components is not only met in a timely manner, but is protected from foreign interference? And I want to finish by returning to the household reality, because net zero will not be delivered by megawatts alone. It will be delivered in homes and communities, and it must be made simple, safe and scalable. The Climate Change Committee's progress report found a 56% increase in heat pump installations in 2024, driven by increased support from government schemes, but it's clear that scaling remains the challenge. Households respond to a simple proposition: reliable installers, clear standards, stable support and aftercare. And that too should be treated as part of the mission to build UK production-based. A nationalist retrofit and heat pump supply chain creates skilled work in every community. Will ministers treat heat pumps and retrofit as part of the same mission, supporting an installer pipeline, quality assurance, consumer protection, and an end-to-end journey from advice to finance to installation to aftercare? Scotland is delivering Britain's energy security and clean power. Now the government must deliver for Scotland, in fairness, in jobs, in infrastructure that turns Scotland's contribution into lower bills and better energy security for everyone. Thank you.
Scotland's contribution to energy security and net zero. To respond for the government minister, and I understand birthday boy, Michael Shanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hutkin. There is genuinely nothing I would rather do on my birthday than an important Westminster Hall debate on this topic, and it is a pleasure and a privilege to be here. Cake to follow. Can I thank the Honourable Lady from Mid-Dumbartonshire, that beautiful constituency on the other side of Glasgow from my own, for bringing this important debate today and for seeing so many members of the Scottish Affairs Committee. As an alumnus of the Scottish Affairs Committee in the last Parliament, it's a pleasure to see it continue going from strength to strength. And as a proud Scot, I want to reflect many of the things that the Honourable Lady has said about the contribution that Scotland has made to Britain's economic past, but also the absolutely critical role that it plays at the moment and will continue to play in the future. And I'll return to that theme later on, but I think I would also want to reflect that it is a strength of us working together across the United Kingdom that has driven so much of the investment into Scotland to make these projects a reality. And I'll come back to that point later, because I know the honourable gentleman from Strangford will appreciate it, if nothing else. Can I just reflect on some general points, but then I do want to come to each of the points the Honourable Lady made very briefly, because they are all incredibly important and things that I think we are working towards. But just on the general argument about what the government is trying to achieve, the way we are trying to tackle the energy trilemma, this question about security, about affordability and about sustainability, is by driving as quickly as possible towards clean power. And our target, our mission of clean power by 2030 is partly around how we get off fossil fuels, and in the last few days have only demonstrated why that is so important in an uncertain world. But it's also, as the Honourable Lady rightly said, how we create the industrial opportunity that goes along with it. How do we get good jobs and industrial opportunity to come with it? Of course I'll give way.
Thank you, Minister, for giving way. And of course we can't ignore the events of recent days in the Middle East and the impact on oil and gas prices and supply. But on supply, it actually just makes it more and more obvious why we should be preserving and making the most of the supply and production that we have in the North Sea, which the oil goes into the European market, but it does not go through the Straits of Hormuz. It stays accessible. Gas all comes to the UK, into our networks. It's vital that we secure our own production. And surely the Minister recognises that the Energy Profits Levy and the ban on new licences puts this at risk.
Well, I was going to come on to the North Sea. Let me just do that just now, because she raises important points. And yes, our domestic supply is important. It's important for the supply of gas in particular, as she said, that goes straight into the pipes around the country. It also, of course, is thousands of jobs in the industry, and I've got to know very many of those people over the past 18 months. It is important, but it's also important to know that it's been in decline for a very long time. I mean, 75% reduction in production between 1999 and 2024. So although it continues to play an important role, we've been a net importer since 2004, and that is only going to continue in the years ahead. So yes, we should continue to support domestic production, and for years to come it will continue to play a part, but our long-term energy security doesn't come from fossil fuels in the North Sea. Just going back to the Honourable Lady's points on the North Sea, she asked if we could pull together a plan for the North Sea transition. We have done that, and we have published that just at the end of last year. It's a fantastic read, the North Sea Future Plan, and encourage everyone to read it. And what it seeks to do for the first time ever is to bring together the projections on what the future of the North Sea looks like, alongside the skills and the workforce planning for the future, and the opportunity that comes from renewables, because we need to look at both sides of the North Sea. Hugely important for 60 years, producing oil and gas, will continue to be for decades to come. But equally, we need to build up the industries that have been important in recent years, but in truth haven't grown as much as we would like, and we haven't seen as many of the jobs as we need. And so it does give a workforce plan. A North Sea Future Board has been set up, which met in Aberdeen for the first time in January. It will meet again in the coming weeks. It is about driving forward actions, not talking about the transition, but actually working through what are the solid things we now need to do to not just talk about the issue, but make it a reality. I'm conscious of time, and there were a number of points I wanted to sort of pick up on. On new nuclear, look, we absolutely see nuclear as a critical component of the clean power plans of the future. It will be the backbone of a clean power system, and it will deliver our energy security in uncertain times. We need to build nuclear faster, which is why we'll respond to the Fingleton review on how we can improve regulation in due course. We have, as the Honourable Lady outlined, also invested in the first small modular reactors at Wilva in Wales. I genuinely hope that we will see a change of government in May in Scotland to one that will look at the opportunities that come from nuclear in Scotland as well, because I had the great privilege of visiting Torness recently, meeting workers who have worked there for 20, 30 years, good, well-paid, highly skilled jobs that Scotland is currently missing out on because of an ideological block from the SNP that we just simply have to remove so we can build the power that we need. On the questions about the grid, very briefly.
Very briefly, I'll take the point you make on nuclear, but Fundamentally, the government hasn't articulated what it plans to do with nuclear waste. It's currently projected with a price of about £60 billion for a radiological disposal facility. Marked as red is unachievable, yet the government says it's critical. None of this is being articulated about how that's paid for, how much comes off bill payers in Scotland, and why Scotland actually needs that when we produce more energy than we currently use.
Well, it's a well-trodden argument that unfortunately doesn't bear out in facts. The equivalent of energy produced in Scotland is more than it uses, but at any given time, often Scotland is relying on nuclear, in fact, and quite often imported from England when it's necessary, when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. So nuclear is critical. In fact, it was relying on gas from Peterhead Power Station recently because Torness was undergoing renovation work. So Scotland does rely on nuclear, in fact, and it's really important. And the argument about costs, I think, would be well placed in the SNP's own plan on this, which says a third off energy bills with independence, with absolutely no figures to back that up whatsoever. But let me move on to some of the key points that have been made very briefly in the time I have left. First of all, on grid, it's absolutely right to centre the future of the country's economy and the clean power that we need to get to households and businesses in improving the grid. We have not invested in probably one of the most important pieces of infrastructure this country has for far too long, and as a result, we're finding it's taking far too long to connect projects that need to connect. And as the Honourable Lady rightly outlines, we are wasting clean power that could be bringing down bills every single minute of the day because we can't get it through the constraints that are necessary. So we do have to build that grid, and with it comes tens of thousands of jobs across the country as well. So it's a hugely important economic opportunity. In terms of community benefits and community energy, I was glad my honourable friend from Glasgow West referenced the importance of community energy and of the local power plan, which was published recently, another fantastic read, which I'd encourage all members to read, which is about the biggest transfer of wealth and power in British history in the energy space to put communities right at the heart, not just of energy infrastructure being built, but of actually owning that infrastructure and benefiting from it. And tomorrow I'm going to the Western Isles to see a project that has benefited greatly from being able to own that energy and take the profits that come with it. Community benefits remain important as well. We did consult on making them mandatory, and we will announce the outcomes of that consultation soon. We have announced bill discounts for people in the proximity of transmission infrastructure and community benefits from that, and we want to see much more shared ownership of energy as well, so communities having the ability to take a stake in these much bigger projects and take the profits that come with that to invest in their local communities. It's hugely important. Now, consenting decisions on these projects are devolved in Scotland, and I would urge the Scottish Government to move as quickly as possible on making those consenting decisions, because every delay to a piece of grid in Scotland means that we are not getting the cheaper power onto people's bills that could make a huge difference now, and those delays are really significant. So I'd urge that to happen. And finally, on grid, the industry is working collectively to make sure that the billions of pounds of investment that is going into building the grid results in supply chain jobs right across the country as well. Just in closing, Dr Hutt, there were many other things the Honourable Lady raised that I would love to spend longer talking about, but at the outset she made the absolute right point around Scotland's contribution to the UK's energy security. It's not a story of the past or a promise of the future, but very much a reality at the moment. We've got to seize the opportunities that come from the energy transition. That does mean creating the jobs that go along with the infrastructure we're building so that Scotland really benefits and gets that economic potential. I'm glad there is some consensus on many of the actions that we've got to take in this space, but the question is how we move further and faster to make this happen. Communities can't wait for those community benefits. They can't wait for cheaper power. And we should root this always in what the government's #1 priority is right now, which is bringing down the affordability crisis that is facing households across the country. The Clean Power Mission is the way to do that, and in an increasingly uncertain world, not least the one that we see on our TV screens right now, the answer is to move further and faster away from fossil fuels to the cheaper, cleaner power that's an economic opportunity for Scotland and for the whole country.
The question is that this House has considered Scotland's contribution to energy security and net zero. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the country, no. I think the ayes have it. I think the ayes have it. Order. Order.